this time, I'll ask Councilmember Bedell to please say the invocation.
Thank you, Mayor. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the much needed rain and cool temperatures. Bless every family represented. In your name we pray, amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have no announcements today. It's good to see everybody. Thank y'all for coming. So, moving down to new business, item 6.1 is first reading consideration of an ordinance to redistrict the 8 single-member election districts for the election of city council members based upon the 2020 decennial census. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Mayor, I have a couple of questions on this. At our last meeting, this ended in a tie, 4-4, which means it was defeated. And I just have a concern that we're bringing it back up. I mean, can we bring up things that we don't like to vote on? Can we just bring them back up consistently?
So as far as that question, it wasn't defeated, it failed to pass, but the failure to pass means that no action is taken. But regardless of if no action is taken or if something fails, there is no prohibition for general ordinances against bringing them back up. There's a very, very limited set of matters, for instance, zoning changes, things along those lines, where there's a prescribed time period before they can be brought back up. But beyond that, Mr. Green, we are operating under a constitutional mandate. And you may not care for the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, but it applies to all states and all municipalities. And it says that one man will equal one vote. We cannot not redistrict our map. We have recognized that things are unequally spread out across our city, and we have a mandate to take it up and take action. So there's nothing procedurally problematic with what we're doing today, and in fact, we are fulfilling the mandate of the United States Constitution.
And if I may clarify, Mr. Mayor, where you say that I have no regard for the 14th Amendment, I do. And I completely agree that we need to redistrict. The only question I have is the way we are redistricting and some of the mapping, some of the lines that are drawn. So I would humbly ask that be taken back. Then I would also ask, can we review the budget and take that back up at the next meeting?
No, you can't because it passed.
So we can only take up things that failed. Is that correct?
So if you have an action that's taken, in order for it to be reconsidered, during that same meeting, there has to be a motion for reconsideration by the person who voted along with it. You can bring up the budget, for instance, is what you threw out. We routinely bring the budget back up for discussion throughout the year multiple times to adjust and make amendments to our budget, right?
I believe so.
There is a state law requirement that the budget be passed by a certain time every year. We have passed that budget. It is not within our authority because state law delegates when that budget must be passed. And for us to reopen the entire budgetary process, no, we can't do that because there's a state law that prohibits that, says you have to pass it by this time. But we routinely open it for amendments throughout the course of the year.
So you're saying that we can only take up things that have failed, or we have failed to take motion to action?
As I stated initially, there's a very limited subset of items outside of general ordinances that you're prohibited from taking back up. The example that I put out there for first discussion was zoning. This is a generally applicable ordinance. There's nothing, if you want to go through the codes, we can go through the codes. If you want to go through Robert's Rules of Order, which is ultimately what we defer to, if there's no specific requirement adopted by the city council or by state law, you go to Robert's Rules of Order. You can look at Rule 38. Rule 38 expressly says you can bring any item back up unless there's a otherwise enacted prohibition. We can sit here and discuss it as long as you
Oh,
want.
I will. And the other question I have, Mayor, is that you called this meeting at 2:30 PM. When you know that one of the proponents on the other side of this debate works and could not attend. And so therefore, I mean, why did you call this meeting at 2:30 and not at 6 PM like our regular council meeting so that the public, more of the public can attend?
As we do with every special call meeting, we called and polled council on when the most folks would be available. This was the time that most folks would be available. There was only one person who could not attend.
Yes, and then quite coincidentally, that is one of the people who voted no last time. It's just a coincidence, I say.
Councilman Green, even without her here today, if it makes a difference, her vote will count as second reading.
Yes, I mean,
So I think that's inconsequential right now.
oh, but I
And I
agree.
think that if that is the case next week, if her vote is a deciding factor, she will be able to vote next Wednesday.
How many meetings have we held at 2:30 or during the day? And I think for the last 5 years since I've been on council, I think I can count 3 maybe.
Madam Clerk, is it a fair representation for me to say that I directed you to call all council members to select a time to work for the majority of city council, and I had no choice in setting the time beyond what worked for the majority of city council?
Yes, sir, Mayor, and that's what I do cross.
Did I choose 2:30?
No, sir.
Thank you.
And to further on, Mayor, under Rule 1327, paragraph E, it says, after the introduction of an ordinance, any member of council or any citizen of the city interested therein may request a public hearing, which may be held at any time designated by council prior to final adoption. I am requesting a public hearing again on this. Because this is a new ordinance that we are passing. It's 1327, paragraph E.
Yeah, that's before final adoption. We'll consider your request.
It says that it says that therein may request a public hearing. So I am requesting another public hearing.
We will consider your request before final adoption.
Thank you, Mayor.
Anything else? Any other discussion?
I have a question.
No, ma'am.
Do you learn about Robert's Rules of Order?
No, ma'am. But we're not taking questions right now. This is a discussion
It's
on
not
city
a
council.
question, it's a point of order, because I don't think you.
And you would not remember this body. If you'd like to stay and watch it, you need to stay and watch quietly.
I've got a comment to make, and to clear some things up that we discussed in the last meeting. I was operating under the impression that that it's a council matter to adopt a map, a redistricting map, and I've checked with a number of different bodies, and when these maps are adopted, there is, usually there's a little bit of give and take, input by individual council members. And I certainly I was specifically not saying that I was lied to by anyone, but there was some miscommunication going on as to whether or not certain specific concerns about my district, which seemed to be more drastically changed than other districts, were communicated to Reverend and Chris Ayers, who reviewed the final map. And I've never been against the concept of redistricting. I've never been against the concept of one man, one vote, and I am certainly 100% in favor of the larger districts downsizing and the smaller districts increasing in order to make things fair and equitable for everybody that lives in West Columbia. That said, there were a number of things in the map where it seemed like it could be tightened up a little bit, where, for example,
there's a little piece that I'm giving to Councilmember Bedell, but then I'm taking another little piece from him, and they seem about the same size. Those types of concerns, that I think if we were to actually submit some specific concerns to RFA between the first and second reading, we could tighten those types of things up and generally keep the map as proposed, but, you know, be a little bit more accommodating to, you know, some specific considerations. And that was always the intent. And due to the nature of, you know, the magnitude of things happening, I think that might have got lost, but I just wanted to speak up and clarify that. So I will vote for this at first reading if we have some sort of way to submit to RFA or have certain considerations heard by RFA. And we can put any kind of constraints on that to make it fair that anybody agrees to. But I think it's pretty clear that this is going to go through first reading because Councilmember Porter's not here. But I think if we did this, that would also make it where we can consider remarks that were heard at the public hearing, you know, in good faith by sending those specific remarks that are made by the public through a process to see if there's any way we can accommodate. So I think that would be a show of good faith as well.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, by ordinance 3.6, we are
Mr.
allowed,
Wilson, you remove her from the audience.
do you understand that we are allowed to speak?
If you remove her from the audience.
1.3.6. We are running a banana republic here. Thank you, Mayor.
Is that something that can be done with Councilman Moore just spoke about?
Yes, it is, and that is, when this body meets and as you discussed today, any direction that this body gives to me, I will take that back to RFA.
If we do something like that, my only request is that we allow our city administrator to be the contact with RFA, not whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 council members getting involved. I think that we muddy the water by having people call and try to maneuver these districts for what they want. And I think that's probably what got us in this issue with these maps not being done for, what's it been, 20 years since they were done? And so it got us in this mess. And we had, if you look at the current districts now, we've got districts that we can roll out and take a house or two here or there because somebody didn't want that house 20 years ago in their district. And that's where I don't think politics needs to come into play here. I think these districts need to be drawn what's best for the city of West Columbia, what's best for it right now. 8, 9, 10 years from now, we'll do it again. And then if that's a different change, then let's do it. Not based on what makes one person more electable to this group or one person more electable to this other group. Because quite frankly, 12 years from now, we're probably all going to be gone from here. We'll be an afterthought in the history of West Columbia. And it's not going to make a big difference. I think we're making too much out of it because we want this in our district, we want that in our district. I personally think what's been drawn up is about as good as we're going to get. If we start trying to take this little piece and put this little piece and do this little piece and do that little piece, all we're going to do is drag this process on, and we need to have an election. Unfortunately, we need to have an election within the next 45 days.
We're working with the election commission on that, but we need to have the election as quickly as.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but this was a process that was already underway. But if this election hadn't come up, we would have been able to have a little more time on the maps. Is that correct? I've heard a lot of criticism out there, well, we didn't get to see this or we didn't get to see that. Unfortunately, when we had a council member resign on August the 1st, and we needed to have an election within a few months, it kind of sped the process up unless we go like it is now, and then it really would have had maybe some weird looking council districts. So the reason that it's been more hurried than I think anybody up here wants, any of our city administration wanted, was simply because of the fact that resignation accelerated this. And, you know, I can already hear somebody say, well, we should have been doing this beforehand. But in reality, it needed to be in place before the elections of 2023. Next year, we still, until 3 weeks ago, had 15 months before that would happen. So
Excuse me.
just so we know that that's what happened.
Can you speak a little louder so we can hear what you're saying? I don't mean to interrupt you, but you've been talking, get that where you need it.
Can anyone else not hear us?
Nobody else will speak up, but I'm telling them.
I have,
In the back row, y'all find that there? Thank you.
Okay, then let me speak. Did you say we can't have an opportunity to speak, or we don't have an opportunity? to speak?
Not today, no ma'am.
What? No.
Not today.
We never have. And the rules say that rules that there's no public input.
We had public comment at the last meeting.
And you lied after we left. Thank you very much.
I don't think it's even me.
I have,
Furthermore, you lied to me.
You go
We'll
ahead,
get
comment.
together so we know these together.
I had a couple of things. I wanted to mirror Councilmember Brooks's sentiment about one point of contact with RFA. I only contacted RFA this time to verify that certain things were shared with them and not, I didn't get into any specifics with them. And I do agree that that's procedurally the way that if we have if we give a mandate to the city administrator to do his job, we should allow him to do his job and not muddy up the water. I did think that the time frame question will be important, when I was asking. So, according to, Adam DeMars at RFA, they can make a redistricting map from start to finish with no comment, in as little as 3 to 6 hours. That's according to him. Now, if there is a full community involved charrette process, then that can be as much as 20 hours. But to take a map and make some revisions wouldn't be something that would take an inordinate amount of time for the time frame the constraints that we're working in. So I did make sure that I clarified that when I was in my conversation with him.
Mr. Moore, you have changes you would like to see done in your proposed district. I just want to make sure I follow.
Yes, and it's based on the fact that my district needs to expand, and because it's undersized, and that other districts around it have higher population, but there's a little bit too much of me giving pieces of my district, which then needs to expand, which is 2 pieces for 1 piece, basically. So I think that that's a little bit too much. But there's 1 or 2 things that if they were different, I would certainly go for that.
Mr. Dickey, do you have changes that if you had a chance to sit down and draw out your perfect version of a map that you would have liked to see done differently in your district?
Of course, I think everybody on council will have the same
Um,
thoughts.
Mr. Brooks, if you had been given a map and said, sit down and draw out exactly what you would like to have, would you have drawn things differently in your district?
Absolutely.
Mr. Goodell, if you were given a chance and you were the one who was tasked with drawing your district first, and you could have any boundaries you wanted, would you like to have some things done different?
I would, Mayor, and just to touch on that, I lived at 1752 D Avenue since 1999 until 2018. I have a lot of family members who live around there, and a lot of work that I've done in the last 8 years. And those people are not happy about my about losing me as a council member either. However, I have told them that they could still feel free to contact me at any time. I would do whatever I could for them, and I would gladly introduce them to the new council member. But this was pretty much out of my hands.
Mr. Pringle, if you were given your choice to sit down and draw any boundaries you wanted in your district, are there things that you would have done differently in drawing up your district?
Is that the big amount of signal?
Mr. Green, if you were given the choice to draw your district in any manner in which you saw fit, would you have drawn it exactly like this, or would you have drawn it differently?
I might have drawn it differently, but I am 100% happy with the map for my district. It is not effective.
Hang on, I'm still talking. The reason why, for you folks who would have drawn stuff differently, but you haven't, is it because you understand that this is a compromise process?
You're asking me that, yes, Mayor. I do understand.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So what you stated was a bit of a straw man, because my argument was based on my district being small and me giving pieces to districts that don't need that piece was a little bit excessive and disruptive to my district.
Okay.
Where are we at? Maybe, Mr. Carter can answer this, because unfortunately, I did not have time to run that by and get all paperwork for tonight. As far as district goes, the other day, I thought we were within about 100 people in everybody's district. Is that about right? Or close to that?
We are within that standard deviation requirement of 10%, which, yes, it's about 109 people above or below the 2177 mark. All the districts are lower than that.
And I know one of the hot button issues has been Bridgepoint. It's kind of, I think, been the catalyst for some of the confrontation or some of the back and forth. If you just took Bridgepoint and said, okay, we'll give this to council member Roy, would that not adversely affect the maps as a whole because of some of the demographics and some of the different things that go into that area? Because that's a pretty, I guess for lack of a better word, pretty wealthy little area right there for that condominium.
Would it dilute the power of the black vote that he has raised as one of his concerns in his district?
Not in my analysis, no. We would not believe the power of the.
Including Bridgepoint into Councilman Moy's district?
So there is a difference as far as, hey, and I apologize, you may not have followed the question. For each census block, which we cannot divide a census block, there is a population makeup and there is a demographic makeup. If you take the predominantly white, non-Hispanic, white census block and put that into a district that has a higher percentage currently of Hispanic or non-Hispanic black demographic, then yes, it's certainly going to impact has the potential for diluting that vote. That's an analysis that I have not completed, and one that, as far as seeing how that may impact the surrounding district, but that's the best I can answer it based on the knowledge.
Yeah, my statement that, my statements about possibly diluting the vote were due to the fact that there's an established, a well-established section of my district that has a high rate of voting that, that according to some members of that street has been part of District 8, and it would be in any close election, it would make a difference in the election. And my specific comment was that I'd like to see that community be involved in the decision and just raise that concern. So,
So Councilman, are these concerns about the actual law, or is this concerns about your seat?
it's concerns about the unfairness of lines being drawn as with regard to preserving the district.
Because what you just said right now is there was a historically residents that have been in District 8 that vote a lot, and they have high voter turnout. And when you saw that they weren't going to be in your district, if I'm not mistaken, you thought that was a concern that needed to be raised.
Right,
I don't
because,
see how that is, like, they can still vote. If they go to another district, can they still vote?
okay, so you're saying
The
that
question is yes or no, can they still vote if they go to another district?
if you
Yes
look
or
at
no? Mayor, or any other council member.
I think any,
Mr. Carter,
I think any resident
Legal
in the
counsel.
city of West Columbia who's duly qualified to vote can vote regardless of what.
is District 8 centered around the neighborhoods of Happytown and Sugartown? Is that a fact or is that not a fact?
Under which map?
Is that the core of District 8? Is that what District 8 is based around?
Under which map?
I'm just asking a question.
Well, I think there's two different proposals
Because
for District 8.
the Bachelor Street neighborhood is not in either of those areas, but it's a well-established neighborhood. And if you look at the actual redistricting standards that are in RFA, they make a big emphasis on preserving communities of interest, which can be defined as a number of things. But that's something that they determine. So by me pointing out that there's an enclave that's in my neighborhood, that's fully a legitimate thing to do.
Any other discussion?
Yes, Mayor, I had a couple more questions that you brought up. It seems to me that we knew about this redistricting for about 10 years now. And so I heard the city administrator mention this, and I believe I was correct. Maybe he can correct me if I'm wrong. That we started working on this a long time ago. Could the city administrator tell me when we started working on redistricting?
So the census was late in providing, the Bureau, Census Bureau was late in providing statistics to municipalities and counties after the 2020 election, 2020 census. We received those results in late 2021. At that time, I got together with our staff to make sure that they knew that a redistricting process would take place sometime between then and the election that would take place in 2023. So there have been discussions among staff on occasion within that time period to now. As Councilman Brooks identified, the resignation of the council member of District 3 provided a urgency that had otherwise not been there. So hopefully that answers your question.
Somewhat. When you say in late 2021, do you mean the third quarter or the fourth quarter?
I can't.
I mean, was it past July or was it before July?
We've been active a lot. I believe that's late.
Okay, so it'd be after July. So we've been working on this for about a year, give or take. I mean, with other staff, with staff members.
I think it's fair to say what I just did, which is that staff members have had conversations about redistricting over that time. I wouldn't characterize it as a full-on project.
Okay, but we started somewhere in 2021, in late 2021.
We received information in 2020.
And if I'm correct, I mean, I did not see the map until, I think maybe a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, let's say 2 months, just to be fair, to give you some time. So, I mean, there was a long time there that there were talks and maybe potentials of revisions or maps made. Were there any maps made before we saw them?
Now, you saw the first map that was developed for comment. You saw the first map, and that was the map that was initially sent to RFA, that we said this is what we developed in-house, and we asked RFA to provide comment and work with us to make sure that we met all district requirements.
So there was only,
Each council member came to my office and reviewed that map. That's the map that we started.
so there was only one map made. There was no other iterations of the map made?
There was one draft map.
And RFA, can they not make a map for us, or do they not make maps for other cities in redistricting?
RFA works with municipalities in various ways. They will handle the entire process, they will work on portions of the process. They commonly will work with in-house GIS departments. In our case, we had a starting point, and they provide guidance and an analysis from that. They do it many different ways.
So they could do the whole thing as a independent, third-party organization.
RFA provides that service as well as other
And
contractors.
do they charge for that service?
I haven't discussed any type of fees or any type of service with them to start from the very beginning and take it to the end, because we had started.
Did they charge us anything for this service that they provide?
No.
I would just say at this time that I would vote for this on first reading as long as some of the concerns are taken up and addressed that we have already mentioned, and as long as they're looked at and given due consideration.
Why don't y'all make motions on what y'all want added to it, and have it added now versus us going off into the blind for the next week and have a totally different map that may not look anything like it. That's what I think y'all need to do. If y'all got something y'all want to add to it, then do it. I mean, just go ahead, that's what I would advise y'all to do, make amendments, do it right now, and do what you want to do. If they pass, they go into this map. If they don't, they don't. That person does wait on a delay in this process another week.
Mr. Mayor, could you tell us what is the requirement for the second reading of any ordinance in the city of West Columbia?
Sorry, I'm gonna need a little more specific.
So after first reading, how many days are we required, what is the minimum amount of time between first reading and second reading of an ordinance?
7 days.
Thank you. So we have 7 days, Mr. Brooks.
We can do that on the seventh day, but it is 6 days, basically.
No, we do have 7 days.
7 days you can run.
7 days.
We do have 7 days, but I don't necessarily think any revisions are gonna make much of a difference at this point. So that's why I said, if you want revisions in there, go ahead and make them now where we know what we're voting on and the public knows what we're voting on with 7 days. You and Councilman Moore have been two of the ones that have been out there talking about, we didn't have enough time, people weren't informed. Well, let's inform them of what those changes are right now, where they have 7 days to do whatever we want to do with those things. But instead of waiting until next week, we come back with a totally different map. Even if one change is made, it's a different map. So if it's possible, go ahead and recommend that we can do that.
So the concerns that I have were pretty much boiled down to 4 census blocks. And they were, the first one, which I think Mickey Pringle and some conversations in that neighborhood has determined are, and also efforts by Brian Carter, creditors to alleviate my concerns about a predominantly black part of my district that was transferring to District 5 and diluting that vote to going under one district. The other concern was just about, as I said, about a district that needs population giving away to districts that need less population. And it seems like the people at Bridgepoint are the most vocal about this, but any of the 3 census blocks, 2 of them are in the Meeting Street neighborhood, and one of them's the one that Bridgepoint's on. So if any of those 3 census blocks were transferred, I would go from that. Any one of those 3.
Hearing no further discussion, if you're in favor of the map, please raise your hand. You oppose, please raise your hand.
Good point. Is this saying that that's the final map as drawn, or that consideration.
So this is first reading on the matter.
It's just first reading on that, so considerations can be given to
Yeah,
RFA.
absolutely.
Okay, all right, I'm changing, I'm voting in favor.
Do that one more time.
Yeah. All in favor, please raise your hand. Hang on. Was anybody there against it? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, in order to make sure that we're clear on the process, if there is some type of change that is being requested, it would be helpful to have the body provide that, but otherwise, if individuals are submitting requests, they can do that with me, and then we can provide a report back to council at second reading.
This time we welcome a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, if you're in favor, raise your hand.
That's unanimous.
Thank you.